Welcome to AXA Coral Live, and great having you join us here at the Kamabi Research Station in Curacao. I'm delighted to have with me Dr Kristen Marhaver, fantastic marine biologist here at Kamabi, and we'll be interviewing her later and getting some of your questions along too. Just to give you a brief introduction, today is all about the coral polyp, the animal that makes up the reef. Wednesday we'll be looking at the coral ecosystem, looking at food webs, food chains, and all that sort of thing. And Friday the theme is coral in a high CO2 world, so thinking about the impact of increased carbon dioxide on the coral ecosystem. Then next week, Tuesday, we're going deeper on the reef into the mesophotic or the twilight zone, looking at what kind of corals grow down there. And then we're ending on a little bit of adaptation, both for coral and for the animals that live on the reef. So please do join us for these other sessions too. But delighted to have you on Coral Live, Kristen.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
You're a marine biologist at Kamabi. What is Kamabi?
What is Kamabi? Good question. Even people who have studied marine biology for a long time don't necessarily know about Kamabi, but it's over 60 years old, and it started just as a small marine biology research station. A few people were curious to learn about the oceans here in Curacao, and it has grown now to become one of the most popular and busy field stations for marine biology in the whole Caribbean. So now you have researchers coming here to study everything from the deep sea and sharks in the deep sea to the plants that grow at the top of the mountains of Curacao and everything in between.
Oh wow. And how do you fit in? Are you somewhere between the top of the mountain and the deep sea?
I like to get just a little bit in the ocean, but not too deep. I study how corals reproduce and how they grow, and most of those corals that we're studying live anywhere between a few feet deep, a few meters deep, and maybe say 30, 40 feet, 50 feet, okay. 15 meters deep. So we spend most of our time in the shallow part of the reef, which is the most biodiverse and the sunniest, and also sometimes the most surgy, and sometimes makes for pretty crazy diving conditions. But we're trying to figure out how corals grow those ecosystems, and then trying to help figure out how we can help them grow those ecosystems.
Perfect. I mean, we're talking about coral, and you talk about sort of coral reproduction and that sort of thing. What, I mean, is these bits of rock sort of like, you know, sort of splitting into two and sort of making two rocks? I mean, what is this coral reproduction thing going on?
Rocks turning into rocks. It's kind of that. It's not quite as magical though as a rock turning into another rock. A coral is not only an animal, but it's growing a rock underneath itself.
Okay. And
it has algae in its skin. So if you want to know if a coral is a plant, an animal, or a rock, it's kind of all three of those things. But to be technical, they're animals. So we'll show you this with a coral that I think is an extra useful visual aid, because you can really see the separate animals. This is the skeleton that a coral grew, and each coral animal starts as just one polyp, one corallite, with a mouth. It's got tentacles around it, and then it's growing the skeleton underneath themselves. So it would be like you attached somewhere on Earth and then just left a skeleton underneath yourself, and then just stacked and stacked and stacked. Grew up toward the sun. Then the crazy thing that corals do, besides building a rock underneath, is they also have algae living in their skin, which helps them to make food from the sunlight. They basically grow like a plant does with photosynthesis. And then maybe the craziest thing they do, at least to me, is they also divide themselves in half. So imagine you're attached to the earth, you're growing a skeleton underneath yourself, you have plants living in your skin to make you food, and then you make copies of yourself over and over and over again, and then you live in a little pile of yourselves.
A little pile of yourselves, wow.
Some people think that sounds terrifying. I think that sounds pretty scary. I'm not sure how well I would get along with 1,000 of myself.
1,000. And is that the typical number? I mean, how many, we've got different types of coral here. How many polyps make up, is this called a colony, or?
This would be called a colony, yeah. Anytime you've got more than one coral in a group, it's called a colony. This colony's got, what, 10 or 15 polyps? But then this one's already got hundreds or thousands. And then some species of corals can live to be 1,000 years old. So then you're talking about tens of thousands or maybe millions of polyps all cooperating. Not only do they have to live next to each other, glued in place, They also have to share food. They have to help each other defend the colony. They have to sort of decide where they will grow and where they will try not to grow.
And so are they connected, the polyps?
They can be. In the case of this coral, they're not necessarily all connected at the bottom, but in the case of a coral like this, every single polyp would be sort of communicating with all the other polyps in the colony.
Wow.
So 1,000 copies of yourself, and then you have to share food.
Well, that's if the corals can do it.
Right. Maybe we should take a lesson from them and be a little bit more cooperative.
Amazing. And so you are studying coral reproduction.
Yep.
So that's this process of splitting in two, or is that something else going on?
That's one way corals reproduce. The first way that they can reproduce is just by making copies of themselves, just dividing in half. And then you really have a genetically identical copy. It would be like you made a genetically identical copy of yourself, and then you sat there next to yourself. But corals can also reproduce the way most animals do, by making eggs. So some corals have separate colonies that are male and separate colonies that are female. And in the case of other corals, like this one, this coral, actually every single polyp of the coral is a male and a female at the same time. So there's lots of different strategies, lots of different ways to do this. And sometimes they can even switch between males and females depending on how much food is available, how many other males and females are around. But no matter what, they all have the same goal, and that's to make an egg and get it fertilized, or fertilize an egg, and then get that egg to grow into a baby.
Wow. So and the baby, I mean, the baby just goes next to the parent, as it were. I mean, how far does the apple fall from the tree?
Some corals, well, I guess pretty much all corals abandon their juveniles as quickly as they can, which isn't maybe the most.
Okay.
It's not the largest amount of parental care invested in the animal kingdom. So some corals actually let their eggs go, and that's the last they receive them. This is a picture of a coral that's releasing bundles of eggs from each one of its mouths. This is actually the same coral species as this one. So you can see here's the skeleton underneath, and there's what their polyps look like when they've got tissue on their polyps. And then each one of these mouths is letting 100 eggs go in a bundle. Those eggs are going to go to the surface of the ocean, and that coral's never going to see them again. It's all up to the eggs. And they'll get fertilized in the water column, and then they can spend up to 2 months floating in the ocean looking for a place to attach.
And do they float, or are they actively, can they swim?
They can swim also. They can't swim very fast, especially because they're so small, but I actually brought you guys some coral babies, and I can show you.
Oh, wow.
Coral babies swimming. You ready?
Okay, well, yeah.
Hopefully you can see this. They're really tiny. I forgot to show you guys that if you look at one of these little dots, this is about half a millimeter wide, and that's 100 eggs. So one egg is really, really small. Let's see if we can see them. I brought a light, and I brought some coral babies, and I'm gonna get really close to the camera. See if you guys can see them swimming. Even with my hands shaking, you can kind of see there's a few moving faster than I'm shaking the water.
Amazing.
So those are each a brand new baby coral. They can live for weeks or months in the water column, and then they have to go find a place to attach to the reef. And if you think it's scary to live with 1,000 copies of yourself, you also can't move. So they have to find a place to attach to the reef, and then they start making copies of themselves, and then they usually don't move for the rest of their lives. So you have to pick a really, really good place to attach.
And what are those places? I mean, we associate corals not with Scotland, where our family's from, but with sort of places like Curacao.
There's more corals living in the tropics, although you do find some types of corals in cold water as well.
Yeah, the Lophelia reefs of Mingulay, for instance, in the Hebrides. But let's not go into that. But we're talking about, if we talk about sort of these tropical coral reefs, why do your babies want to? What do they like to find?
What are they looking for?
Yeah.
It would be like it's sort of like anybody looking for a place to live. You're looking for somewhere that's safe. You probably want some food nearby. You probably want to be around other individuals of your species. You probably don't want to live somewhere with no other humans. And in the case of corals, even though these babies are so tiny and so small, they can detect colors, they can detect sunlight, they can detect the chemistry of different surfaces, they can tell whether something is limestone or algae or a sponge. And so they're making this decision one step at a time, trying to find a place that's really clean, has a little space to grow, has lots of food, has just the right amount of sunlight. And if everything kind of lines up, then boop, coral attaches, it makes a mouth, it makes its tentacles, and it starts the process of building a colony.
Amazing. And do I get it right that you're helping, giving a little bit of a helping hand in your lab? You might be sort of going and collecting sort of very juvenile or the fertilized eggs, and then sort of let them get a bit bigger up here, and then taking them out
Exactly.
and helping them find a new home.
Exactly. We're trying to, well, there's actually quite a bit of research on Curacao about how to help corals survive that really tricky process. It's basically the life stage we know the least about, and it's also the life stage that's the most important if we want coral populations to recover. So there are some really cool groups here on the island that are doing active restoration, making fragments of corals that already are growing on the reef, and also growing juveniles from eggs and trying to get those to survive back on the reef. But another specialty we have at Kermabi is just trying to understand the science of that whole process so that we can discover the answers to puzzles and then teach everybody else. So we think of ourselves as kind of like a research lab to make restoration more successful no matter where it's done. And one of the things that we're doing in that research is trying to understand exactly what kinds of surfaces and textures those corals want to find, so we can make sure those signals are still underwater.
And I mean, so we're trying to find some homes, starter homes for baby corals. And I mean, we hear a lot about the coral habitat diminishing. Is finding a starter home getting harder? Is that why they need that extra bit of help?
Yeah, definitely. We are not giving them very good choices to very good housing options on the reef right now. Typically a coral wants somewhere that's nice and smooth, nice and clean, really clear, clean water, no algae sort of interfering with their colonies. Corals grow very slowly and algae grows pretty fast, so they can very easily get overgrown. They also want the right kind of wave action. They don't really like when they get covered with sediment or sand or mud. And pretty much everything humans do when we get near a coral reef sort of shifts the balance toward all of the other organisms. So we tend to add pollution and take out fish and add in sediments. And so we're giving them some pretty bad places to live, pretty bad options. But one of the things that is happening in the research here at Kermabi and actually around the world is work to try to understand if we can make better surfaces for corals. Can we give them more surfaces to land on naturally? Can we give them better surfaces to land on in the lab and then use those to outplant corals? And actually I think I have some of them here. Oh, we've got just a few really simple examples here.
Okay.
So one of the things we even want to know is, say, would they rather live on something that's limestone colored, something, it's ceramic, but it's the color of like a coral skeleton? Or would they rather live on something that's more the color of coral and algae? Or would they rather live on something that's dark? And we also study things like whether they would rather live on ceramic or limestone. And starting next year, we're doing a really cool project with engineers from the University of Illinois and microbiologists from San Diego State University. And we're going to be studying all kinds of crazy biomaterials, materials that nobody's ever put in the ocean before, some materials that nobody's ever even invented before. And we're going to be sort of throwing as many darts as we can at the board to see if we can figure out exactly where corals most want to live.
Wow. I mean,
no pressure.
No pressure. I mean, there's sort of bioengineering coral baby homes. How did that become it? That's a fairly niche job. I mean, how did you get here? That's
a pretty weird job. Yeah, sometimes when I'm in the ocean and it's dark and it's 10 p.m. and I'm just waiting around, I sometimes think this is a pretty weird job. I'm in the dark underwater waiting. And this year we've spent some months of this fall. We've done that 16 nights in a row.
Wow. Trudging
underwater and waiting for the corals to reproduce. I can't say that I got here because I had a master plan. I wasn't a kid who said, I'm going to be a marine biologist no matter what. Actually, the first time I ever saw the ocean, I was 13. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it's so salty. I had no idea that it would taste that salty. But that was the first time I'd ever been to the ocean because I grew up in Kansas and I had never had a chance to see it before. At the same time, I was always a kid who was really interested in puzzles and tiny animals and digging in the mud for bugs and exploring and asking questions. So I was always a really curious kid, and I always liked small animals and biology. I worked really hard in school, and then everything kind of came together when my friend convinced my father and I to learn to scuba dive because my friend wanted to be more like James Bond. So I accidentally became a marine biologist because of James Bond movies, I think. Thank you, James Bond.
Where was that first dive? Where did you...
Let's see, the first time I ever went diving was in Hawaii. Since there was not a lot of places to scuba dive in Kansas, we flew to Hawaii, and I remember being really cold, and I didn't really like it. I was super cold, I was a tiny little kid, I wasn't very comfortable, and I just sort of thought, I'd rather be back on the beach building a sandcastle or looking at smelling flowers or something. But it took a few times before I felt like I was kind of more comfortable and not afraid. And then I started discovering all the tiny stuff that lives on reefs, little tiny shrimp and sea slugs. And so my role in the family was to find all the tiny animals, so then all of my family members could come look at them. And so now if we look back, it's kind of not a surprise that I'm studying the tiniest corals.
Yes.
Turns out that I was really into tiny animals from the very beginning.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's just an amazing job to have. I'd love to sort of ask some of the questions that we've had
Absolutely, let's do it.
come through. And the first one, in fact, from Pellington Middle School. It's really about diving. How long does it take to become a certified diver?
Oh, great question. It used to be quite a bit more complicated. It used to be hours of book study and hours of practice in a pool. But now you can try it out before you're certified. So you can try it and find out if it's something that is exciting to you. Although even if you're uncomfortable, try it, give it a couple chances. But now I think you can learn to dive in, say 2 or 3 or 4 days, especially if you go somewhere with like a really big dive shop that's got all the teachers lined up ready to go one after another. Just a few days. And oftentimes it's also available in colleges, so sometimes you might even be able to learn during your school. Excuse me.
Water? You have...
Jamie has to ask a long question.
And so, because what I've sort of hear from people is that you've got this basic thing. You can get in the water, you can go up and down, left and right, and that kind of thing. But then, do you then have to learn how to night dive, to be a science diver, to be a this diver? I imagine that what you do is probably a little more complex than the average recreational. I'm going to go on holiday and
there's a
Hawaii
little more training involved.
Okay.
To do some kinds of marine biology, you can do pretty much just the basic dive training, but then oftentimes you're also required to do scientific dive training. And a lot of that is about making sure that you can hover very carefully and not touch the bottom of the ocean. It's also about making sure that you know all the safety procedures, so no matter who you're diving with, you are trustworthy enough to be a good rescuer for your buddy. But it's not nearly as complicated as I would say some other professions where it takes years and years of training. You can get enough training to be a marine science diver in, let's say, a few weeks, a few months, depending on the program and depending on the place you go. Being a good swimmer and being a good surfer and being a adventurer, a good explorer, being curious all help too. Some people pick up diving right away, and it's awesome to see how quickly people will get good at science diving sometimes.
Fantastic. This is coming on from what kinds of sharks have you seen? I know you studied this more.
What kinds of sharks have I seen?
But what about the sharks?
Let's see. I have never seen a hammerhead. My sister has, but I've never seen one. I've seen a really huge nurse shark that lives here in Curacao, always in the same little place under the same crevice. It's like 3 meters, 9 feet long. It's huge. And it's always under the same little crevice, just hanging out. Probably my favorite sharks. We try to get close and see, but we try not to disturb it, because sharks taking a nap, hanging out. Yeah, it's doing what it wants to do. Probably my favorite sharks I've ever seen are Caribbean reef sharks, because they really look like kind of the typical image of a shark, really fat, the really sharky shape, long tail. And I've seen maybe 3 or 4 or 5 at a time. And I remember one time one coming really close to me and just turning and kind of seeing what I was doing. And I remember thinking, this is a cool animal. They're really beautiful up close.
Wow. And I mean, I'm just going to go through these questions from Pennington. And it's, have you seen damage to the reefs from pollution?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. A lot of times we think about pollution being stuff like oil or sort of toxic waste burbling from a factory somewhere, but the kinds of pollution that affect corals the most are really fertilizer from growing crops and from watering lawns and fertilizing golf courses, and sewage, just dumping sewage straight into the ocean, which still happens all around the world, including in the US. And both of those things hurt corals because sewage and fertilizer fuels the growth of algae, and it fuels the growth of bacteria, it fuels the growth of pathogens, and then all of those things attack corals or outcompete corals. So I've definitely seen reefs where you can just tell that the algae are winning and the corals have diseases or their tissue is dying back, and you think, this is really probably not water I want to be in either.
Wow. So, I mean, how long have you, I mean, this is a question, is how, have any of you studied the same reef over a course of several years? So I was going to ask you, how long have you been working in Curacao?
That's a good question. The first time I went diving was 21 years ago, and the first time I came to Curacao was 11 years ago. So I've been studying the reef out here. I've been watching some of the corals out here for more than 10 years. And it's really interesting to see how much change happens in just a small amount of time. I think on Wednesday, Mark is going to try to show you guys some 3D tours of the reef and show how corals can grow and shrink through time. It's really amazing to see how quickly you can lose coral, but also how fast it can grow back if it's healthy to start with.
Wow. And what kind of changes have you seen here? Is it this sort of doom and gloom, or are there stories of hope?
There's some pretty amazing recoveries. There was a bleaching event here a few years ago, and corals lost big chunks of tissue, but then later on you could see the edges that survived sort of scoot back out. That was exciting to see because they spent a year or two just kind of holding steady, and then all of a sudden they got enough energy to grow back. Another of my favorite things I've seen here is right out here in the water, maybe 10 feet of water, a big concrete platform sunk in a hurricane. And every time we're working with the coral babies and we have extras, we send them off the end of the pier to be karma. We say, thank you for being part of science. They go back into the ocean. And now there are a lot of baby corals on that one big concrete block.
Is that the big, just out here?
Just out here.
And quite a lot of brain corals.
There's a lot of brain corals on there, and there's also some of this species of coral, which is actually quite hard to find underwater. This species and its cousins. And we think that some of the coral babies that we've put back in the water have actually decided to live on that concrete block. And some of them, they started this big. Now some of them are now 10 years old.
No,
so
just over there yesterday.
You don't necessarily think about how much change can happen in just 10 years. But say you plant a tree now, in 10 years you're going to have a really big tree. And it's fun to see the same thing happen with corals too.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There is hope, and there are things growing.
They can grow pretty fast. If they're happy, they can grow pretty fast.
So we're going to go now to Callender Primary School and asking you about the rarest coral you have ever seen.
Ooh, that's a good one. The rarest coral I've ever seen. One of the things that I try to study in my research is how corals reproduce. And so one of the quests I've been on is to find corals reproducing that no one's ever seen reproduce before. So there's a rare coral, it's called pineapple coral, or elliptical star coral, or the scientific name is Dichosenia stokesii, or Stokesii, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And it's pretty rare. You can go on a whole dive and not see it, but what's even more rare is to find one and then find it releasing eggs.
Okay.
And I think only 2 or 3 people have ever seen it releasing eggs. Maybe more, but we don't know of those observations. We don't have records of them. And just about 3 weeks ago, I got to see one releasing eggs. And I was so excited, and I was twitching, and I was surgy, and I was taking lots of photos, and thinking like, this is so cool to finally see this after wondering about it for years. So sometimes it's not necessarily the thing that you're looking for, but maybe the behavior that coral is doing that makes it really rare.
And this is one, I mean, just discussed a little bit earlier, but it'd be great to get your feel for it, is the impact of plastic pollution. Obviously in the UK, there's a lot about plastic pollution at the moment. Blue Planet 2 and Sky Ocean Rescue both have a sort of big sort of impact on plastic pollution in our sort of consciousness.
Yeah.
Is that a problem for the coral reef as well?
It's a problem for reefs in a couple of ways. I never put plastic at the very top of the list of threats to corals, because things like sewage and fertilizer and overfishing and dredging and damaging them and climate change are all worse. But plastics show us a couple things. One is that no matter where you tow a net in the ocean, you'll find pieces of plastic, which really shows us that we managed to change the entire ocean. So if you don't believe that we heated up the whole ocean, well, we got plastic into every single chunk of water in the ocean. So we changed the entire ocean, which is unbelievable it's unbelievable, but we did it. The other thing that's kind of scary about plastic is it's a weird surface. It's not a natural surface. And so sometimes we worry that it might be growing more, say, coral pathogens than a regular surface would underwater. It might be floating around and moving invasive species from one place to another. And also, it's not food, but it looks like food to a lot of marine life. So it's really a nasty plague, but it's not the only thing we have to worry about. If we only take care of plastic and nothing else, we're not gonna be doing our proper job.
And is there physical damage caused by sort of nets and that kind of?
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the times I saw a shark was actually a baby shark, and it was just stuck in a gill net. And I had never seen a shark at that reef ever. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, I guess I know why there's no sharks in this reef. It's because the babies were getting caught. And baby sharks are really cute. They're not as cute as baby corals, but they're really cute.
Okay, so we've gone from the rarest, and we're now being asked the weirdest thing you've seen in the ocean.
The weirdest thing I've seen in the ocean. There are some pretty great sea slugs. There are some pretty funny animals that are so goofy looking, you cannot really believe they're animals.
Wow.
So sea slugs are a kind of snail, but their shell is inside, so they basically just look like a slug on the outside. There's one here that looks like lettuce. It's called the lettuce sea slug, and it just looks like a little pile of lettuce crawling around on the reef. That one's pretty weird. Another really weird animal that we have here is called the basket starfish, and it's like a regular starfish where it's supposed to have a sea star. It's supposed to have 5 legs, but then each leg has branches that have branches that have branches that have branches, and so it can become about this big with all the little tendrils opened up, and if you shine light on it, it closes up, looks like a basket. And there's one pair of these basket starfish that we have seen in the same place every time we've looked for like 7 years. They're living in the same octocoral, the same gorgonian, and every night they climb the gorgonian to feed. And so no matter when we go to that reef,
wow,
if it's nighttime, we're like, hey, the sea stars are still here. It's a weird animal and is doing a weird thing. It's they've got their home picked, and it looks like they're never moving.
Brilliant. Moving on to sort of Boulder Academy in Isleworth. Your career in science. When was there a sort of switch that said, actually, you know what? Doesn't matter about coral, but I want to be a scientist. I want to follow my curiosity in that direction.
Oh, that's a good question. When did I catch the science bug? I always liked biology. I liked learning about it, but I never really knew what a career in research really was. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college except my dad, and he was an engineer, so none of us in our family really knew what a research career meant or was. But I remember him talking about a company that his college roommate was running, and the company was trying to make a cancer drug in the egg whites of a chicken by getting the right gene into the chicken and into the egg and into the egg whites to make a cancer drug with chicken. And I thought, okay, I guess computers are kind of cool, but biology is obviously a way cooler thing to study. So I think that sort of potential is what made me decide to study biology. And then I was really lucky that there was a lab studying coral genetics where I went to college at Georgia Tech, and I just volunteered. They told me, no, we don't hire freshmen, and I sort of just wiggled my way in. I had to watch for 2 months without touching anything. And finally they let me just grow algae to feed to rotifers. And then after I sort of proved my commitment, they started letting me work on coral research. So it was mostly the curiosity of what biology can do, and then it was opportunities, and then deciding over and over to look for opportunities where I could keep studying corals.
Brilliant. There's quite a number of sort of expedition-y type questions. And I mean, do you go out? I mean, I suppose you've got a field station here, so you can go out sort of on a daily basis. Do you do a sort of liveaboard? Do you do those sort of long sort of journeys to go and study faraway corals?
Expeditions at sea. I've been part of a few. It's one of the great things about being here on Curacao and at Carmabi is we have such a easy coral playground to study. We can just jump in the water here, we can drive 5 minutes and swim to the reef. But I've been part of a few expeditions that were 2 or 3 weeks long, and we dove every day to survey an entire island, all in one fell swoop. We did a couple of these, Carmabi scientists did a couple of these expeditions with the Waite Foundation to survey Barbuda, also to survey the entire island of Curacao. And for those expeditions, you wake up really early, you jump in the water, you do your survey, you get out, and as soon as you're allowed back in, you go back in. So I think we did something like 45 hours of diving in 2 weeks. I felt like a person who had been sent to space to find out what would happen to your body. My ankles got really fat and my fingernails started to peel off. Really? Some pretty weird stuff happens if you spend a lot of time in the ocean. It was really, really fun though. Some of my favorite memories are being just in that focused mission mode for that many days in a row.
Which leads on to Tom's question, which is, what do you think it feels like to be a fish? Bloated fingers and no fingernails.
Yeah, I guess I kind of knew. I guess I started turning into one. What does it feel like to be a fish? I would like to imagine that it's not as sweaty as being a human on a Caribbean island. I don't know if fish sweat, but it seems like it would be nice to have the water sort of always cooling you off. I think it's probably also pretty scary because fish have to find a place to hide, they have to find a place to eat, they have to find a mate, and they have to move around really carefully. Always be careful. Always sort of be strategic. It's probably also a lot of work. Some fish have to eat pretty nasty tasting algae in order to get enough food to survive. So you just have to chew on algae all day long, every day. And some fish are very bad hunters. Some fish miss something like 95% of the times that they try to eat another fish or eat a piece of prey. It sounds like a lot of work.
That does sound like a lot of work.
So being a coral, you just get to sit around.
Just sit around and be yourself and multiple times.
All you have to do is just build the world's coral reefs, right? That's more straightforward.
A small task. So we talked about sort of what might feel to be like a fish, but many of our audience and students will never have swum on a reef. What's it like to be on the reef swimming, surrounded by all those animals?
Sometimes my friend calls it a Disney moment, where you sort of all of a sudden see colors and shapes and sparkles everywhere, and the sun is glittering and the sand is sparkling, and there's waving gorgonians and octocorals, and there's fish all bobbling around. It sort of puts you in a trance. It's such a different world, and it's so pretty but relaxed at the same time.
Okay.
It's really sort of meditative or hypnotic. Every once in a while you run across a reef where you go, I feel like I'm in a fish tank. It's so beautiful and so busy and bubbly, and it's quite amazing.
Amazing.
Quite amazing.
So if you can, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also, if you can't see a reef by scuba diving, you can learn to snorkel, you can go to a public aquarium. Even going to a store that sells fish, you can kind of get that same idea. They have a tank with lots of different colors, lots of different corals in it. And the corals that people grow in home aquariums now are pretty wacky colors, so you get a sort of a crazy party atmosphere, even if you're just at a fish store or an aquarium store. And
what you see in an aquarium and what you see in those places looks fake.
Some of it is a little bit crazy in terms of colors. People are getting into collecting some pretty wild corals, but a lot of aquariums try to recreate the same thing that you see on a reef, where you have lots of diversity, and you have hiding places for the shy fish, and you have places up at the top for the water column fish, and you've got the fish sifting the sand and low worms and holes. So I would say a lot of public aquariums do a pretty good job of recreating what it might be like. It's always fun. It's always best to have your face in the water. I also forgot to show you guys this coral already.
Okay.
We have to make sure that we get into.
Well, shall we
show you our pet coral.
So the pet coral. So tell us about, because we've got 3 or 4 more questions. So let's the pet coral.
Ta-da!
This
so
is like a magic trick.
we talked earlier about how they have algae in their skin, but I forgot to show you guys this while we were doing it. So do you want to zoom in, or I'll lift it up? Okay. So now that we're talking about growing the reef and what it's like to be a coral, so this is just a little coral colony that was sampled in the lab for a genetics study, and now we are just sort of keeping it as a pet and learning about how it grows. And all this brown color is the algae that lives in its skin. So that's the algae that's making sugar and helping it to grow. And then one of the things I love about this colony is you can actually see on the side how all of its skeleton grew, and how there's just a tiny little layer of tissue up at the top. So that little tiny brown stripe is the whole layer of coral tissue. And these guys can grow a few millimeters a year, maybe half an inch, maybe a quarter of an inch. So it's very, very slow going. But the cool thing is that underneath that little layer of skin, there's an awesome sturdy rock. And if you give those things enough time, they grow a whole entire reef. So one of the things I love about just being on a coral reef, besides the colors and the fish life, I like looking at how much work all those corals did. There's a lot of work they had to do to build that whole thing, and it's always super cool to see that that's just a little skin of animals still working really hard, but that they've built something so big by working together.
I mean, it's quite amazing that something that small can build something that you can see from space.
It is pretty mind-boggling. You guys saw how tiny those little larvae are, and even when I work with them, sometimes I go, this can't be where corals come from. This can't be how they're born, because it's so mind-boggling how big they can grow. But one of the things we're finding out in our research is that the conditions really matter. They might stay that tiny size for years if they don't find enough food and if they're not healthy enough. But if they've got enough food and sunlight and they're protected, they can also grow pretty fast.
Brilliant. And so it leads us on to just a question from Matt. Why are the coral reefs so fragile?
Why are they so fragile? That's a great question.
Are they fragile, first of all, and if so, why?
They're fragile in one way, and they're pretty strong in another. Coral reefs are systems that evolved in the cleanest, clearest water in the oceans. Actually, Charles Darwin couldn't understand why a coral reef could exist in water that was so clean and clear. And you guys are going to talk to Jasper about one of the answers to that puzzle.
Okay.
How does a coral live in water that's that clean and clear? So corals didn't really expect us to come along, because they learned how to grow in water that clean and clear hundreds of millions of years ago. So they practiced surviving hurricanes, they practiced getting chewed on by animals, they practiced getting pieces of their tissue broken or fragmenting. And so a really healthy coral can recover from any of those things really well. But corals did not evolve when humans were dumping fertilizer on them and dumping sewage in the water and eating all the fish out of a reef. They didn't evolve. They survived some pretty crazy temperature changes, but they didn't evolve to survive what we're doing to the chemistry of the ocean and the chemistry of the atmosphere. And then they didn't really expect us to bring all of those things at once. So it's sort of like any accident or injury or illness. If you're healthy to start, you're pretty good at getting through one nasty flu or one nasty broken bone. But if you're just stressed out in so many different ways and hurt in so many different ways, then you become very fragile and very sensitive. So we've really given them a rough set of rules to work with. And we sort of pushed them to the limit, and now we're like, oh, whoops.
Which I think it leads on to
take our foot off the accelerator a little bit.
To our sort of closing question for today, really, which is, in your opinion, what single, easy and achievable thing could all humans do to help our planet? and probably by extension coral reefs right now?
The whole planet right now.
Yeah, what should they
The whole
do?
planet right now.
There you go, the whole planet right
The
now.
whole planet right now.
Do this.
I think the most important thing we have to do is see our governments commit to protecting oceans and protecting nature on land. There's actually a really cool competition right now, not a formal competition, but an informal competition with different countries protecting bigger and bigger chunks of their oceans.
Yep.
So Palau said 80% of our water is off limits to fishing and off limits to mining. And you're starting to see countries compete against one another to see who can make bigger and bigger marine protected areas. If we want to do just one thing, it's make natural parks and make marine protected areas and truly protect them. And the reason that works is because you'll have fish grow back, you'll have economies recover, you'll protect tourism jobs, you'll create carbon sinks, you'll help countries realize that conservation and economics aren't conflicting priorities, they're actually things that align. So if we commit to big protections, then all of the stuff in between trickles in. Go knock down the doors of some politicians and demand some marine protected areas.
So what that involves is find out who your representative is, who's in charge, who can make decisions on national environmental. So in the UK, that would be a member of parliament. In the US, that would be a senator or
representative, somebody who's making legislation, somebody who's advising the government from a consultancy or from a
and say,
branch.
like, I want to know how much of, you know, the US's or British waters you're saying you're going to protect. You work out whether that's enough, and if you don't feel that's enough, you write back and say, can you up your game, please?
There's a worldwide goal, I think, to put 30% of the world's oceans in marine protected areas, but then there's countries who are going, yeah, let's go for 80. So it's a little bit of a contest to see who can one up each other.
Wow.
And if you really don't think you have a connection to a legislator who's listening, or if you don't think that there's a way for your voice to be heard where your government is, the other thing you can do is find the biggest lever you can pull and pull on that. So if you're somebody who, say, buys all the light bulbs for a big company, or if you're somebody who makes the recycling program for a big school system, you can find the one place where you can make the biggest impact the fastest. Put your energy there.
And so if you're, you know, in year 5 in Kansas, grade 5 in Kansas, and you're not in charge of the light bulb budget or any, you know, that's a bit sort of you know, above where you are. What are those things that, you know, yeah, I've written to my representative, got lost in the post, but I actually just want to I understand the advocacy side, so trying to get others to change on my behalf, but I also want to do something personally.
Something personally in your life.
Yeah.
There's also some really good statistics out there on how each of us affects the planet with all of the decisions that we make every day. And the things that each of us do that affect the planet the most are how we live and where we live, how we travel, and what ways we travel, and then what we eat. So you can decide that you will ride your bike instead of taking a car, or that you'll carpool instead of riding by yourself. You can decide to eat less meat or eat no meat. You can decide that you'll live in a much smaller apartment, maybe use the heat less, or use solar panels instead of heating oil. And if you make one big decision in one area of your life, you'll actually make a big impact overall. So you don't necessarily have to worry every minute of the day about every decision you make if you're doing one big thing that makes an overall change on the energy you use, the water you use, the land that's used to make your food.
Amazing.
Pick one thing and then just
one thing.
do it.
One.
Really do it.
Pick one thing and do it well. Amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your amazing stories, your insights, and your passion for coral, your babies, and the reef.
Thank you for the good questions, and thank you guys for the good questions too. It made me think a lot too, which is always nice, always fun.
Thank you very much. So this is a wrap for today from AXA Coral Live on Curacao, beaming live from the Kamabi Research Station. Thank you very much for being with us, and see you on Wednesday. Bye bye.
Bye guys.